athletes who are role models, making a difference, trying to live up to those admonitions. And all of a sudden, my world had devolved into where can I find more alcohol?
Told in your book. It's hard to describe the emotions that you feel reading this. It's just it's raw. It's absolutely raw, and it's one of those things where you get into your story. Like you draw people into it.
And the real comeback in this, Mike, was being a good father
Mm.
and maintaining continuous sobriety. I was never really concerned about the ability to rebuild a practice. I had 64 first-round draft picks and the very first pick in the NFL draft 8 years. And our practice was all about role modeling. So, I was confident with that. You'll have setbacks in life. Um, we all hit points. And can you be resilient? So, for example, I walk into the office every day knowing that notwithstanding how much uh, pre-planning, energy, focus, commitment we put into a project, something will happen and something will go awry. So instead of being thrown by that, I expect it that's just the nature of the world.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Leigh Steinberg, thank you so much for being our guest a second time on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. I barely slept last night, just so you know. I've been reading your book, The Comeback. I absolutely, and I told you this before we hit record, I absolutely love this book. Everybody should buy this thing, whether they've been through this or they haven't. This is literally the roadmap for if you're knocked down in life, this is how you get back up. And it came from your heart. It's a generosity of your scars like I've never seen before from an author. Leigh, this is unbelievable. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you, buddy. So we're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about MD Envoy. We're going to talk about Concussion Foundation, and we're going to talk about Agent Academy. Okay, so we got a lot to cover. Let's start with the book. That's the biggest thing in my mind, simply because anyway, I can't get it out of my mind. There are so many things about this book. We could talk for 3 days, you and me, and I know we don't have that kind of time, but if it's okay with you, can we go through like each chapter and just kind of talk about each chapter briefly? And I'm going to ask you questions too, obviously, right?
Sure.
I didn't realize you and Earl Campbell were so close.
He came to our Super Bowl party back in 2011, and we immediately bonded. And earlier this year, I went to the Earl Campbell Awards in Tyler, Texas, and I love him, and we sort of started about the same time.
He's such a great guy. He really is. And he does so much for the community that people don't talk about enough, you know? So anyway, I just thought that was really cool. By the way, the thing about Warren Moon having the most combined yards of anybody, any quarterback ever, and considering he's the first African-American quarterback in the Hall of Fame, I mean, wow. I mean, you can't read this book without it affecting you at a deep level, I don't think.
It was probably the highlight of the 52 years I've spent representing athletes was having him ask me to present him at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton.
Yeah.
And because his career spanned 23 years, he played 6 in Canada and 17 in the NFL. And so we sort of grew up together and, shared much more of a relationship than a stereotypical one.
So I remember back in the day when he was looking to come out in the NFL, right? I remember back in the day, they would take African American quarterbacks and they would try to convince them to become a wide receiver, try to convince them to become a running back, that kind of thing. What I found fascinating about this was we talked on our previous episode about your life story, and you were very generous to share with us how important your dad was in your life. After reading this book, I didn't grasp from that interview how important he was and what a trailblazer he was when it came to, for instance, racial relations, right? And and racial justice, right? It's interesting that your dad was an example for you growing up and championed these causes, and then Warren Moon comes around and you're working with him to be a trailblazer and literally changing the way people view, right? He went from, hey, can you be a running back, or can you switch to running back or switch to wide receiver? He went from that to all these different teams lining up in almost a bidding war, right? Or actually it was a bidding war where they're trying to secure his services. That's a huge progression.
So it's almost hard to imagine now, but when he came out in 1978,
Yeah.
there was a unspoken feeling that black quarterbacks didn't have the intellectual capacity or leadership skills to head a team. And so Warren would have been drafted in 1978, but it would have been more as a backup.
Yeah.
And he wanted to play immediately, so he went to Canada for 6 years. When his contract expired, the USFL was anxiously bidding on players.
Mhm.
He had the CFL interested and the NFL, and he was the first pure free agent in football because no one had the rights to him because no one put a draft pick down on him.
Right.
And so it was 12 teams got into a bidding war, and eventually he chose the Houston Oilers.
What a hugely victorious story. I mean, and an example for people of stick to your guns. That's what your book's about. Stick to, if you're committed and dedicated to a particular vision or to a particular goal, stick to it. There are all kinds of things that are going to be thrown in the way. I didn't realize Steve Young had all the obstacles thrown in his way that he did. I did from a distance, but your book reveals that. The Aikman thing with the Dallas Cowboys, that was crazy. I watched it, of course, because I was, watching sports and sports news and all that kind of thing. But I didn't have any idea that all that went down. I didn't realize Tex Schramm ran that campaign and was trying to win over the hearts and minds of people about bringing Aikman in, that kind of thing. I mean, it just crazy. And then he gets fired, right? I mean, just crazy.
They all got fired.
Yeah.
Tex Schramm, Tom Landry, and Gil Brandt. And Troy is told, we're going to build this whole franchise around you.
Yeah.
And that lasted about a month because Dallas
Steve Walsh
had the first pick in the supplemental draft. And oh my gosh, they used it on the quarterback who had just won the national championship for Jimmy Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And so now with a team that was struggling in terms of talent, here he is, and he's told the whole future is his. Yes, except there's a quarterback competition.
Right. And the head coach trusts him more than he trusts you.
Right.
Boy, what an uphill battle, right? And
Yes.
then you come to him and you're like, do you like living in Dallas? Do you want to stay there? Is this right? You went through and did your typical thing where you put them first and asked them questions that are revelatory, and you figured out, you know what? This is where he needs to battle.
So, Mike, I think the most important skill in life is listening.
Yeah.
It's creating trust around another human being and drawing them out so you understand their deepest anxieties and fears and their greatest hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
And if you can put yourself in another person's heart and mind and see the world the way they see it, I think you can move through life gracefully.
Totally agree with you. 1000%. I'm on my soapbox all the time talking about how those of us in this world, and some of this is social media, but some of it's our upbringing, we stay here. We stay at the surface where it's like you talked about, where it's politically correct and it's safe and all that. The pain that people are feeling, like you're talking about, is here. You have to ask questions to get here, and you have to listen to what their responses are.
Right. And there needs to be an internal introspective view of what really is important to each person. Is it short-term financial gain? Is it long-term economic security? Is it geographical location? Is it family, spiritual values? Is it autonomy? Is it making a difference in the world? Is to have clarity internally about what's critically important so that you stay with your values. You mentioned my father, and my dad raised us with these two core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family, and the second was try to be a person that feels the pain of other people and try to be a healer in the world and take the initiative to make a positive difference. So I grew up with those values that they never changed, and still I judge myself by what I am as a parent to my children, and am I viewing the world around us and seeing where potentially we can make it better.
You brought me to tears several times in this book. One of them was when your grandfather came to your dad's class and watched your dad teach, and how you described his gentle energy and how you described your grandfather seeing, because he never quite understood why your dad wanted to be a teacher, right?
Well,
He had other plans for him.
we came from a restaurant
Yeah.
heritage and nightclub heritage. My grandpa ran, at the end of his life, Hillcrest Country Club, which was the one place that Hollywood people could go because they couldn't get into LA Country Club. And so I grew up on the laps of Marilyn Monroe and Groucho Marx and
George Burns, Jack Benny.
George Burns took me to my first baseball game with my grandpa. And so my grandfather didn't really understand why my dad was going to be taking a different career path and not following in his footsteps until one day he watched my father relate to the students at Jordan High School in Los Angeles, which was the toughest part of LA. And all of a sudden he got it. He saw the warmth and the love and the nurturing that was part and parcel of how my father related, and he got the emotional reward that my father got from teaching and counseling and eventually being a principal.
He saw how those students responded.
Yes.
Right? How he connected with those students. And I'm telling you, I was crying. Yeah. So you don't know this. Is it okay if I share something with you?
Absolutely.
So I'm 59 years old, and all my life I've wanted to be an educator. I've literally taught for 34 years in the real estate industry. I just never charged for it. I just wanted people to learn. 8 months ago or 9 months ago now, I was hired as an adjunct instructor for a college here in the San Diego area. And I teach my first class April 6th. And I'm actually back in school at the University of Oklahoma. I graduate in May with my bachelor's degree. I start my master's program in July. And May of 27, I take a full-time position that's waiting for me at the college.
That's awesome.
All my life, I've wanted to be a professional educator. So the stuff about your dad and your granddad, I mean, it hit me so close to home. So, yeah.
Well, plus it shows your ability
Yeah.
to be flexible and to actualize a dream you've had your whole life, and not let age be an impediment. In other words, I'm a baby boomer, and we're not living to 65 anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to hear that, you'll be in your 60s
Mhm.
making a difference in young students' lives.
I believe I can. I truly, with every fiber of my being, I believe that I can have an impact on our industry. There's a very wise man that once said, if you want to change the world, start in your own little corner of it. Well, I'm starting in my own little corner of it, right? This podcast is part of that too. But I feel like I know in fact, I know what the real estate industry needs. And I feel like I can impart that, I can teach that to the students so that when they go from where they're with me to where they're licensees and they're actually practicing, they'll actually do better and the industry will do better as a result.
So I've taught sports law at UC Irvine here in Southern California. Taught it at Chapman
Mhm.
University, and I taught it at Concordia University, and I've lectured on 80 campuses, and creating that next generation of skilled, talented, ethical professionals is a worthy enterprise.
Yeah, when I grow up, I want to be just like you, just so we're clear. So, so thanks for letting me talk about that. I appreciate it. So let's talk, if it's okay, let's talk about each chapter. Is that okay? So the
Sure.
first chapter is rough to it's rough to read, but it's about rock bottom. Can you talk about that for a second?
So, I grew up in a family that had no alcohol, and
Yeah.
for most of my life, I was called one beer Steinberg
Mhm.
because that was my capacity. And I got into a period of life in later in life. I'd
Mhm.
had a pretty charmed life until then, where my two boys were diagnosed with blindness, something called retinitis pigmentosa,
Mhm.
um, and it crushed me. And then my father died a long death of cancer, and that was really destabilizing. Then we lost a house to mold and had to knock it to the ground. And then it started to create tension in my marriage. And I turned to the wrong thing. I turned to alcohol. And um, I was in denial. I didn't know I had a problem. And eventually I crashed and realized that the most important thing was focusing on sobriety. And so I'd shut down my condo. I had shut down my business. I'm 61 years old and I'm living with my parents.
Mhm.
And and I had an epiphany at one point, and I said, you know what? You got raised with these core values, and you're not able to make a difference in the world right now, and you're not being a consistent parent. Um, and then proportionality came into the mix because the epiphany was I'm not a starving peasant in Somalia. I don't have the last name Steinberg in Nazi Germany in the late 30s, early 40s. I'm not sick in any way other than self-induced with alcohol. What excuse do I have not to try again?
Mhm.
But there was confusion, despondency, darkness in those moments. And I finally decided, if nothing else, I'm going to be sober and I'm going to be a good parent. And the rest of it can wait. So I went into a 12-step program and with a unique fellowship. And I did every part of recovery that was possible with the same energy and enthusiasm I'd built a career with. And so next, month, if everything goes well, I'll be 16 years continuously sober. And the real comeback in this, Mike, was being a good father
Mm.
and maintaining continuous sobriety. I was never really concerned about the ability to rebuild a practice. I had 64 first-round draft picks and the very first pick in the NFL draft 8 years. And our practice was all about role modeling. So, I was confident with that, but you have to be prepared.
Mhm.
And you have to be prepared for people saying, well, you couldn't manage your own economics great. How are you going to help us? How can you guarantee that you're going to be sober? How can you, do you still have contacts, or are you too old?
Mhm.
And so I was realistic about all of that. But I wrote the book to try to give hope to people out there still struggling. And it could be marital, it could be health, it could be financial, it could be substance abuse. They're all very setbacks.
Mhm.
And when we encounter them, the question is, how do you recover?
Who are you?
Yes.
Right? You
Yeah.
learned a lot about who you were. And it's like, it's hard to describe to you. Sorry. It's hard to describe to you how cool this book is.
That's nice of you to say.
I felt what you felt. And that's not easy, Leigh. That's not easy to put onto paper. And that's not easy to put out there for people to read. There's some real vulnerability and authenticity here that I want people to I want people to understand how important it is that they read this book. Even if they've never hit rock bottom, it'll give them the tools to help people around them that are going through it. That scene where you're sitting in your dad's bedroom, your dad had passed away and you're sitting on his bed and you're looking at all the things that are on the wall. You got me, buddy. You got me.
Yeah, it was not an easy process because I'm in a different dimension now in terms of productivity and involvement. But reliving that was tough. But what kept me going was the fact that there might be somebody out in the world who's still struggling,
Mhm.
and maybe I can be helpful in their lives and make a difference in their lives because it's people try to hide whatever their deficiencies are. And my feeling is, what lifetime would I be waiting for to share experiences that might be helpful to other
Yeah.
people?
People suffer in silence, Leigh. They really do. And that's in there. That's in this book. How sort of closed in you felt and how sort of your world was sort of closing in around you, right?
I got
And
to
then
yeah, I got to the point where my only coherent thought every day was where I could find more vodka.
yeah.
And I had um, gone from this dominating sports practice
Mhm.
that was the biggest boutique sports practice there ever was, and athletes were role models, making a difference, trying to live up to those admonitions, and all of a sudden, my world had devolved into um, where can I find more alcohol?
Do you mind if I share something with you?
Sure.
So I'm reading your book, and I told you I got emotional several times. There was this running theme for me, and this is probably going to sound a little bit selfish, but I have a background in the mortgage business. When I started 34 years ago in real estate, I started in the mortgage business. And I started because I was turned down for the first home loan I ever applied for. And it propelled me to get licensed and get into the business. And I literally closed thousands and thousands of home loans in my career, thousands of real estate transactions too. And what I found, and this kept coming back to me, was the people who applied for a mortgage who had a bankruptcy in their past were more serious about their credit, and they were better borrowers because of what they went through. Right? Iron sharpens iron, that kind of thing. Because of what you went through, I believe you became a better person, but I also believe you became a better agent, a better business person, the whole thing. Like, you treasure your time now. It feels like greater than you ever did before.
Well, that's absolutely true, because at the height of my career, I was competing with myself.
Yeah.
In other words, 6 out of 7 years for a spell, I had the very first pick overall in the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had 12 players in the Hall of Fame. I had baseball, basketball, football, but it was always running towards the next deal, the next situation. The amount of time I ever sat back and contemplated where I was in life, it was so fast and so furious that I'd never done that. And there were parts of the rehab experience that actually I was grateful for, because I got some time to think about who I was at 60
Mm-hmm.
and how what the next phase would be like. And so it was like being given a second chance. And you don't do this alone, Mike. You're helped by, I was helped by so many supportive people, and people I didn't know reached out. I mean, at one point, Charles Barkley called me, the owner of San Antonio Spurs. I mean, there were another agent, um, when I didn't have enough money to reapply for my agent's license. A competitive agent,
Brought you a check.
Dennis Gilbert, brought me a check.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll never think this was like a solitary achievement. It took a village.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate. It was the first time I realized how it's possible to become homeless,
Mm-hmm.
because I was lucky. I had a mother who was still alive, and that home. I had people who would help me with money and loans and everything. But I saw, if you didn't have that, um, how what seems impossible could actually happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so well told in your book. It's hard to describe the emotions that you feel reading this. It's raw. It's absolutely raw. And it's one of those things where you get into your story. Like, you draw people into it, the reader into it. It's remarkable. So chapter 2 is roots. Can you talk about that for a second? I mean, I know we touched on it with your dad and everything.
Yes. So it's values.
Yeah.
It's an understanding of the importance of relationships and family, and your duty to try to make a difference. If you're grounded in that, you can come back to it. But if you don't have purpose, and I was just helped by a relationship with a higher power, and but if you don't have those roots, then it's hard to know what to come back to.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had great role models growing up, and people that inspired me, and I had mentors, and whatever it is I've achieved in the world, I didn't do alone. I did, as a function of really amazing people helping me.
And that's important for people to understand. There's so many people in this book. I mean, there's so many people in this book. June Jones is one of them, right? What a remarkable story. Earl Campbell, all these different people that came in and out of your lives, right? Or in or out of your life. June Jones called you or invited you to come talk at SMU. And there's an investor there that happens to be there in the room. And all of a sudden, now they're talking to their people. And now all of a sudden you have a Houston office, right? That's out of a casita or something. I mean, this story is incredible, Leigh. And it's amazing how people rallied around you.
So there was a point where we needed to be refunded.
Yeah.
I needed to go again, and I waited about 3 years so I had some sobriety to fall back on. But a group of Houston investors agreed to fund a new firm, and I wasn't even certified at the time. I had to reapply, and they still had enough faith that they refunded me. And there was, a fellow named Dave Blanchard, and there was a fellow named Scott Irwin, and they I brought Earl Campbell, who's sort of a legend in Texas.
Kind of.
I brought him to the investor meeting. And so again, I'm the beneficiary of that. But I think that there may be parts in everybody's upbringing that weren't the most supportive. Or you could have had a family like mine that was immensely supportive. And so those are my roots. I had brothers that were really helpful. I had kids that were really helpful. And here we are, and life's pretty exciting.
It's a village, baby. It's a village. It's what it takes. Now, chapter number 3, patience. Don't jump the snap.
So it's an understanding that recovery is a process, and that I have a phrase I always tell players, which is stay in process. Don't obsess on ultimate results. In other words, don't go into training camp and count the number of people at your position and how many they'll keep and worry about that. Do the basic things that are necessary step by step. In my case, it was being patient with the 12-step program. It was understanding that there'd be a process, and time has to pass, and a real commitment to change for the better for people to have confidence in you. And patience is knowing that I don't have a divine right to represent athletes. They come to me because they have needs. And so you have to be prepared to go through a process that's pretty tough, where people are asking tough questions, and you need to be patient through that. But stay in process is something I tell players all the time. Do the preparation, do the training, do the practice, do the production in real time, and the results will take care of themselves.
You know who else talks about process a lot? Nick Saban. Right?
Yeah.
Chapter 4, courage. We suffer, but we survive.
It's being willing to take a brutally hard look at yourself and see where your shortcomings have been, and to understand and to break denial. The problem with substance abuse is it convinces you that you don't have a problem. And so the usual standby position that people have who are going through this is resistance and denial. I don't have a problem. Everything is fine. I'm running this massive firm. It's based on solid principles. We're still attracting clients. The problem is in business, you will always deal with crisis first, right? But if you never step back and are introspective, and understand what the flaws in your structure are, then you can never change it, right? Because you just keep responding to crisis and breaking news and so you have to have the courage to take a hard look at yourself and figure out realistically where you are in life and then how to get back towards what your center is.
You're nailing it right on the head. It's very, very difficult to be introspective, right? And you talked about this in detail in the book about how difficult that is. It's almost like when we were talking. So I know we were a chapter ahead, but we were talking about patience a minute ago. And when you were talking about patience, one of the things that happens when you're running a sports agency like you're running is time is money, right? We got to get all this done. You've got places to be, you've got people to talk to, right? You've got contracts to work, all this stuff. It's got to be excruciatingly difficult in that type of a world, doing what you were doing and succeeding at the level you were succeeding at, to get to a place to where you go, okay, wait. Like you postponed your Super Bowl party that you did every year because you had declared bankruptcy that year, right? Or the year previous, but it was somewhere within that year, right? That 12 months. And you decided not to do that because you had just declared bankruptcy and you didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. But that goes to your level of honesty and commitment and your good heart and all that. But it also goes to your willingness to be patient, your willingness to sort of step back, right? And this is one of the most beautiful things about your book is you literally go step by step by step about how you put this back together. I didn't realize you had been out for 6 years. I didn't realize that. And then you had been out all that time, and then you waited more time and then went to work putting this together in a holistic way. You didn't just like go out and start trying to piece things together. You started putting things together on purpose, right? The right type of design, the right type of way to do it. And you talked about in the book how you went through that decision-making process.
And what's necessary in sports representation is to have infrastructure.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did is that in 2014, I went on book tour, and it took me back to about 50 campuses. So I was able to meet coaches, athletic directors. I was able to lay the groundwork to have that infrastructure. It's having the secretary at a football program in a relationship. It's having the trainer. It's having the academic advisor. It's having all of that. So I was on a book tour, which was laying the foundation for everything. And part of it is, they have a thing in the unique fellowship. You're not supposed to obsess over the past nor shut the door on it. So you had to not be defensive about what had happened. I was fortunate that athletic parents, I'd talk out what I'd been through. And in most cases, they just said, congratulations, good for you. And so they were accepting. And, but what was critical was to put the supportive foundation together in the right way, to stay on the principle of athletic role modeling. The athletes I've worked with have raised like $1.3 billion for various charities across the country. And I believe you can use the support of athletes triggering imitative behavior to domestic violence and bullying and racism and sex trafficking and because athletes can have an impact on triggering imitative behavior. So I just use those same principles to rebuild. And the practice has been built around all sorts of players at all sorts of positions, but was the niche was the quarterback.
Yeah.
And so when I signed Paxton Lynch in 2016, that was a first round quarterback.
Mhm.
So that was a sort of signal to the world that we were back functioning.
Yeah. And you also are incredibly open about everything. You're incredibly open about your own doubts about whether these parents are going to accept you, about whether they're going to, like you said, ask for a guarantee that you're going to be sober. You can't give them that guarantee. This is a day
Oh,
by day thing, right? So there's no way you can honestly do that. And so, the thing that I saw in here in the book was how you had these doubts and you share them openly. Like you're completely vulnerable in this book about what you were thinking about, what you were potentially anticipating. And you did get some pushback. There is a part in here where somebody hung up on you, that kind of thing. But for the most part, parents were like we talked about a minute ago, parents, because you had been through what you had been through, they felt like you were on the other side of it and you were better because of it.
and but again, as I said before, I don't have a divine right to
Yeah.
represent players. In other words, you've got to be tuned in and focused on what their needs were. And um, eh, for example, if you choose to be a public figure,
Mhm.
then you can't complain about the fact that there's some negative feedback at times.
That people will judge you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you can live a different way if you choose. You can live a very private life, but because of the high profile of athletes, that wasn't going to be possible
Mhm.
anyway. In
No.
other words, it's I got arrested for drunk driving, and the news ran in every newspaper across the country, and it ran in Japan, and it ran in other places. And I'm like, who am I? President Obama?
Mhm.
I mean, who cares?
Mhm.
But that's a function of profile.
Mhm.
And you better one of my greatest guilt was making headlines for negative behavior and the effect it would have on my kids.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to be self-destructive, and it's another thing to understand the impact you're having on other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to your kids, it's just gut wrenching. It's like, right? So, chapter 5, hope it ain't over until it's over.
Um, so it's a sense of optimism.
Mhm.
It's a sense of light at the end of the tunnel. Can you see a uh, better vision of yourself? Can you understand all the detritus and destruction and all the baggage? But beyond that, be able to see a future that's different.
And stick to it, right? Be committed, just like Warren Moon was, just like Steve Young was, just like Troy Aikman, right? Be committed to getting there. People are going to throw obstacles in your way, but you're committed and driven to get there. And so you just deal with it. You handle all those types of setbacks and you charge through it.
The thing that people don't really understand is that in the midst of alcoholism, you're or addiction, you're governed by cravings. In other
Mhm.
words, I have to have that next drink. I have to, it's like obsessive. After a while in recovery, the cravings go away.
Mhm.
It takes several months, but the cravings go away. So you have to do you have to stay involved in a program that's going to get you there, but it's not an everyday struggle with, the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. It's I'm just in a different place, and I continue to do recovery activities that are helpful, but it's not a daily struggle anymore, and it's complete obsession when you're in the middle of it.
Absolutely. Chapter 6, accountability. Step up or sit out.
Yeah. So, the past is the past,
Mhm.
and it my problem was not being dishonest or cheating people or breaking rules or the rest of it. My problem was alcohol, and once you get beyond that, then you have to come to peace with the fact that you it's impossible to change the events that went on during during the point I'm responsible. No one forced alcohol down me. There was no conspiracy to do this. It was my choice and weakness that uh, made this happen. And once you can admit that and be accountable, then everything flows.
Yeah, it all comes together. Chapter 7, relationships, someone to lean on.
Oh boy. So in the recovery program, I have a sponsor
Mhm.
that helps you through it, and I've had basically the same one for 16 years. Um, some of the people I went through sober living with are still really close to me, and I have a amazing fiance who's incredibly supportive. My daughter and I are best friends, and my two sons and I are close. So it's those relationships are critical. We, as human beings, are sustained by interaction with others and the concept that we're part of something larger
Mhm.
that is supportive. You can see the world that way as and when you have real relationships with people, it's based on brutal honesty, but you can share anything and the stigma goes away, the stigma that people are worried about being judged and the rest of it. And again, back in 1975, when I had the first pick in the first round of the draft, and we got the largest contract of all time, from that point on, there was a public nature to what I was dealing with. I used that platform to try to do good. And having profile is only helpful if you can use it to do positive things.
No, I totally agree with that. Chapter 8, resilience, never stop pushing.
Oh my goodness, resilience will save you every time.
Mhm.
It's inevitable that however you define it, you'll have setbacks in life. Um, we all hit points. And can you be resilient? So, for example, I walk into the office every day knowing that notwithstanding how much uh, pre-planning, energy, focus, commitment we put into a project, something will happen and something will go awry. So instead of being thrown by that, I expect it that's just the nature of the world. And so you can get knocked back, but can you get back up?
Mhm.
And uh, life is about resilience. If there's one thing that I hope that people take from that book, it's that they can be resilient, and that their circumstances are temporary.
Well, you've been an amazing example in this book. I mean, people have got to read this. Chapter 9, adaptability, jukes and cuts.
So it's understanding that change is a critical part of life, and circumstances will change. You've got to be flexible. You have to be to have vision about where things are going, in business, where markets are, what the trends are, and be adaptable to change circumstances. You and I grew up at a time when there were I did, the black and white television, right? And a phone was something with a rotary dial, and you had party lines, and the thought that you'd be able to speak through your wrist was something out of a Dick Tracy. It was
It
like
was in the comic book, Dick Tracy.
I mean, I remember going to Disneyland, and one of the big rides in Frontierland was from the Earth to the moon. Okay. And that happened. In other words, if I tried to describe growing up in the 50s to my kids and how different things were, and now we have AI, and now we have social media, and now the biggest change that ever could have happened in sports representation is the advent of NIL. It changes everything. 15-year-olds want a marketing director. And I'm sorry, I'm not really set up to deal with a 15-year-old. Gambling made a major difference. Conference realignment. So these changes are not happening in a linear sense. A little bit of change, a little bit of change. They're exponentially exploding.
It's blowing up, yeah.
So you've got to be able to understand the changes and where the world is going and floor it, right? I mean, I still get directions from my car and don't use the GPS. It works for me, but I have an office filled with young people, and their memory of where things are. We've got generations growing up instead of on books and imagination. They're growing up on big screen video games and big screen color and sound, and if they text and someone doesn't text back immediately, no one likes me. Or if they post and there's not enough likes, it's like we've got a generation addicted to social media with all the dopamine in their brain, relying on the triggers and prompts. So you better be prepared if you want to have longevity in a profession or a relationship or anything, that change is just inevitable.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And by the way, you did a great job talking about it in here. That 6 years that you were out, everything changed. Everything just, I mean, it was not the same business when you left the business as it was when you got back in. And you talked about that in detail in here. And it's important that people understand this took some real adjustment. This took some real flexibility. I mean, you're living what you're talking about,
Absolutely. I mean, the basic way that people communicate with each other.
Yeah.
What the mindset is of a 21-year-old, and how they view life. You and I grew up on newspapers. This is a newspaper. You
Yeah.
can
By
hold
the
it
way,
hands and read it. And that's not the way information's transmitted anymore for a majority of the people.
no, it's true. And I go to the airport to go fly somewhere, and I don't fly very much, but when I go to the airport, one of the first things I do is look for a Wall Street Journal. So I can just feel it, I can smell it. I mean, it's like, right? And a lot of times they don't have them. They've sold out. I mean, it's crazy. So chapter 10, generosity, be a change agent.
So that's the understanding that. Now, again, back to my dad, he used to say, if you're waiting for someone to make a change, as small as picking up this piece of trash off the floor, or as big as climate change or racism or something. So the tendency is to wait for the amorphous they or them to solve the problem. Older people, political figures, will do it. And he'd say, if you wait for them, you could wait forever. The they is you, son. So we are the they. I mean, we have the capacity to look to others and think about how we can improve the world and make a difference. When I saw players be hit in the head from concussion with dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and premature senility and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, I thought, well, what's my role? Am I just putting dollars in the bank book of players, or don't I have a responsibility to try to use every bit of effort, hold conferences, educate people as what happens when you're hit in the head, and discover neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire a concussed brain. And so I've got a charitable foundation that does that, but people make a difference in all sorts of ways. Parenting is probably our most critical function, and every one of us can be a better parent.
It's what we talk about here a lot, probably more than most people like, but we talk about parenting here. And the reason we do is we talk about leadership, and then we get into parenting, which I believe is sacred leadership, right? And parents need to be more involved. Parents need to be like, one of the things that we talk about a lot, I hope it's okay if I share this, but one of the things we talk about a lot is when you have a teenager and that teenager is giving you the Heisman, right? The talk to the hand thing, right? The worst thing in the world you can do as a parent is throw up your hands and say whatever and walk out the door, because you just lost that kid. That hand that they're telling you to talk to is them crying for help. They want you to stand your ground, and they want you to prove to them that you love them more than you do yourself. Okay? And if you love them more than you do yourself, you'll stand there. You'll take the humiliation, you'll take the abuse, and you won't back down until they allow you in. Okay? That's what parents need to understand. Parents need to understand that being a teenager is a rough gig. Okay? It is not easy. And they need to stand their ground, and they need to make it past that hand. At all costs, they need to make it past that. I don't care what it costs, I don't care how painful it is. That needs to happen. There you go. There's my soapbox, right? Okay, chapter 11, new ventures.
So I thought at the end of this that one of the things to motivate and incentivize people for going through change and being resilient is what the quality of life can be at the other end of it.
Yeah.
So in this chapter, I talk about all the new modalities in health and longevity that are available, and how we can integrate them into sports, but how people of a certain age can put them into their own life and not have dementia and Alzheimer's and be cognitively fit. We talk about the Agent Academy that we do to train younger players. I talk about a new project which involves the representation of physicians called MD Envoy. So it's sort of a catalog of what the different projects are that I'm working on now, and to show people that you can find purpose, meaning, and fulfillment at the end of this process,
Mhm.
that it's there's light at the end of the tunnel, as we said before, and there's and fulfillment.
So I read that you walk 15,000 steps a day
Yep.
and you go to the gym 3 days a week.
Well, actually, I have a personal trainer who comes to me, but
Well,
it's
but
same
you work out 3 days a week.
same difference. And and I do hyperbaric oxygen 3 times a week, and there's a process called Bimini, which has hoses that go into a bathtub and oxygenate the water, and then it goes into your system. And there's a process called NanoV, and I have a hydrogen type machine, and so I use all of that in my own life, because when I hit 70, I said, I'm not done yet.
Mhm.
I want to have another long run. And my kids still need me, and there's still change to make in the world. And how can I spend the least amount of time with medical problems and the most amount of time being productive?
So you got me with that one. When I read it, I don't do 15,000 steps a day, but I walk 70, 80 miles a month. And in October 11th, after you and I did our first interview, I got sick and I went to the emergency room and they told me that they were going to do everything they could to save my life that night.
Hmm.
And they went to work like a beehive. You wouldn't have believed all the things they did, how fast they did it. They brought in a cardiology team on their day off to save my life. And they removed the single largest blood clot out of my chest that they've ever removed out of anybody in the history of Scripps Hospital. You know Scripps Hospital, they've been around a long time. Okay. And they saved my life that night. And one of the things that the ICU doctor said the next morning when my wife came back from getting 4 hours of sleep, right? He waited until she got there. And then he sat with us and he said, listen, we set a record last night, which I was never trying to do naturally, right? And your heart's incredibly strong. And the first thing my wife said was, it's all the walking. So we've now had a follow-up, 90-day follow-up echocardiogram, and my heart looks really good and it looks really strong. And it survived that massive, I mean, it was a blood clot, Leigh, that was like this. It was like an upside down U. How in the world I survived that is beyond me. And everybody who has any medical background that's seen the picture of it, they told me that God's not done with me yet. So when you mentioned that in the book about I'm 70 years old and I'm not done, that kind of thing, it got me. It definitely got me. So chapter 12, healthy minds, healthy bodies.
It's about the new biomed breakthroughs that are occurring that will change the fundamental way we deal with preventative medicine,
Mhm.
as opposed to just reactive medicine, and never get to the point. So it's understanding things like stem cells
Mhm.
and the effect they can have. I've had hundreds of millions of stem cells. I'm probably bionic at a certain level, and but it's understanding the breakthroughs in 20 years before someone would get Alzheimer's. There's a test that tells you if you have a proclivity towards it. If you test negative, great. If you test positive, then there are drugs and things they can do. Won't cure Alzheimer's or dementia, but can slow down the growth of it. So it's just being aware of all this. And then with athletes, I look for modalities that can do two things. One, most games come down to the last quarter or the last drive. So is there the ability to peak energy, productivity, and performance in critical game circumstances? And there are new modalities, machines, supplements that can do just that. And second of all, can we rehab and cure a player quicker from injury and cut down that rehab time? So that's one application. The other application is for you and me and everyone that's over 30 or 40 to be able to prevent catastrophes like your blood clot from happening.
Yeah. I love it. It's absolutely amazing. So can we talk about MD Envoy for a second? It's a new thing that you're doing that's literally for physicians. Talk to it. Tell us about it.
So Dr. Michael Suk is an amazing human being and is a physician, but is like running for head of the AMA. And we got together and he said, doctors don't have the same advantage that athletes do. They don't have anybody doing career planning with them. They don't have anybody doing placement with them. They don't have anybody negotiate their contracts. They don't have anybody doing financial planning. What if we could use the model of what you've done in sports with physicians and empower them to have more control over their life? So we've started with 130 physicians who are all partners in this, and this will grow over time. I mean, who do we trust more than doctors? They're the lifesavers. And so we had an assemblage at our Super Bowl party. We had about 100 doctors, and they all got together, and it was exciting. It was just like the early days of sports when I started. There was no right to representation. So in 1975, 76, I could call up a team and say, I'm representing this player, and they could say, slam. We don't deal with agents. So it evolves over time where people get more and more protections and rights and autonomy over their own lives.
Well, and it also, by the way, and I know you've thought of this, and I know this is part of it, but it makes the medical profession better because what you're doing is you're helping them with their longevity. You're helping them stay in and continue to get the reps and continue to get better and better without them. And you're heading off that frustration that terminates their career, right? Where they get frustrated and they quit, and all that experience is gone. All that knowledge is gone. So when I had my stint in the hospital, they brought in a cardiology team to save my life. The head of that cardiology team was a doctor that walked into the emergency room that I was in, and he said, we're going to go in and we're going to take all that clot out. And I asked him, I said, what are my chances? And he wouldn't answer me.
That's comforting.
He wouldn't answer me because I was in bad shape, Leigh. I was in really bad shape. And I didn't realize how bad a shape I was in, but that basically made it clear, right? That same cardiologist there was a team of 5 with him, right? And they went in and saved my life that night. The next morning, he comes to the ICU to my room and he says, I never know why some people live and some people die. But he said, I'm glad you lived because you're one of the good ones.
I'm glad you lived too.
That was one of the sweetest things anybody's ever said to me, Yeah, right? Trying not to get emotional. It's not working, but I'm trying. So fast forward 3 months, and we own a property in Carlsbad that we're remodeling. And next door is the next door neighbor and I are talking. And she had open heart surgery 15 years ago. She's had 14 stents inserted since. They call her the Iron Lady. She says to me, she says, "Who's your cardiologist?" I said, I don't know. She hands me a card. She said, "This is the best in the business." I went home, looked at my hospital paperwork. He's my cardiologist. That's the same cardiologist that saved my life that night. It's a small world, right?
Yep.
Can you talk about Agent Academy for just a second?
Um, there are thousands of young people in business school, law school, sports management programs who want a career in sports. But no one trains them. So you can go to business school, law school. When I went to law school, I no more would have been ready to understand how to set up a practice, how to recruit clients, how to service clients. So we've done about 35 times from Washington to Chicago to New York to Houston, Dallas, all over the country, a program where for a day or 2 days, we take people, and I was about to say young people, but we had people as old as 70 who are looking for, like you did, for a way to transfer into a new phase. And we teach them listening skills. We teach them how to negotiate off the book I wrote, Winning with Integrity. We teach them branding and marketing skills. We teach them contract negotiations. Uh, we teach them a whole variety of skills, from setting up a charitable foundation to dealing with the athlete in crisis, and it jumpstarts their career. And so what I'm hoping to do is create a new generation of ethical, principled people that understand the power of sports to make a difference in the world.
I love that. That is so unbelievably admirable. And it's something that's needed, right? They need to learn how to listen. They need to learn how to connect. They need to learn how to shake hands and look people in the eye. This young generation, not the 70-year-old, but I'm talking about the young generation, right?
We teach them how to network,
Yeah.
how to go to a banquet or some event and talk with someone for 5 minutes, get their card, put on the back of it, middle-aged man in the steel business who had a boil on his nose or some identifying factor. And then you have what you and I used to call a Rolodex of contacts. So we teach them how to network.
I love that. Rolodex. You say Rolodex to some of these young people now, and they just look at you like, what?
Yeah, no way.
It's crazy, right? So one last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, if it's okay, is the Concussion Foundation. This is something that's incredibly important, and you've made, in fact, medicine's made incredible strides because you made this a priority years ago, like decades ago. Can you talk about that for a second?
So I was sitting representing half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and they kept getting hit in the head in games. And we would go to doctors and ask, how many is too many? What's the magic number? They had no answers. So we started holding concussion conferences. The first one was in 1994. And we had Troy Aikman, Warren Moon, Steve Young, Drew Bledsoe, a number of players there. And so what we've continued to do it. By 2006, we had Ben Amalu, who the concussion movie was done about.
Yeah.
And he told us that 3 or more he thought was the magic number, and after that, you have those problems. I called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. And so we've continued having these conferences, and I set up a foundation to raise money for research and training for people in the field. So at our Super Bowl party each year, this year we had 2.5 panels that talked about neuroplasticity, the ability to reconnect different parts of the brain and connect the synapses, and we continue to fight on. It's not just football, it's all collision sports.
Yeah, it really is. Do you mind if I share something with you? So, working my way through college, I worked in a grocery store. And that grocery store was just a few blocks away from Junior Seau's house. And his parents, his mom, would come in and she would only go through my line. She'd wait 12, 13 orders down. She'd wait and they'd try and take her to a different check stand and she wouldn't go. She'd come through my line and she'd want to tell me how Junior was doing at USC. And she'd always invite, every time she came through, she invited me over for dinner that night. She was one of the sweetest people you ever met in your life. And when Junior took his own life, I watched the news coverage, and I watched his mother and his father, who I had had a chance to get to know, walk into his house after he committed suicide. It turned out he had one of the worst cases of CTE ever known.
So what it is it's tau, T-A-O, a type of protein that nestles in the brain. And people used to ask, what is it going to take to finally get movement on this issue? And I used to say, sadly, someone's going to have to die.
Yeah.
And then Dave Duerson killed himself, and then Junior killed himself, and
Mike Webster, yeah.
Very tragic, but it did have a stimulating effect on the thing.
Yeah, it really did. So is there anything else you'd like to cover?
No, I'm good.
I cannot thank you enough.
How you order the book?
Yeah, how do you order the book?
We're now in pre-orders.
Okay.
And you can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble and pre-order the book. So the minute it comes out, you got it in your hands.
That's awesome. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the name of the book is The Comeback. It's right there over your shoulder. It is an amazing, amazing read, and everybody needs to buy it. Everybody needs to read it. Leigh, I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience again. This has been awesome, buddy.
I enjoyed it, and thank you for the kind words.
Thanks, buddy.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.